Okay, so Espen Kraft said some things, and I'll start by saying I agree with a lot of what Espen said, but I think he may have forgotten to mention something that's pretty important, and that's what I wanted to add to the conversation. In case you're unfamiliar, Espen Kraft said that synth companies are scamming you. The TLDR of his video, which I have linked down below, is that synth companies are making instruments that are pretty much just software or like a plugin and putting it into fancy hardware and then selling it to you for as high as you're willing to pay. Pretty loaded, but I must say I do agree with a lot of what he said. So for starters, let's talk about the whole computer and VSTs inside hardware thing. Computers and VSTs will always do more than hardware synths, and I accept that computers are more powerful and more flexible than almost all hardware. But what I wanted to add to the conversation is something that I've believed for a while now, and that's that all we're really paying for when it comes to getting gear or hardware is workflow and speed, not sound. And those are two things that I'm willing to pay for to an extent. Using a MIDI controller or a mouse or a trackpad for tons of VSTs, to me, feels a bit uninspiring, especially when it comes to programming and sound design or even creative sequencing. And I understand that some folks, it might be all that they got, or it's their preferred method, and that's totally dope, right? Whatever works to get you to make more tunes, I'm totally down with. But making sounds on the computer has always felt more destination-based for me. When I'm using my mouse to click on this and grab that knob and specifically turn that up, it's a thought that was predetermined. But when I'm on a synthesizer, it feels a bit more exploratory to me. And now that we're talking about perception, a desktop synth module and a separate MIDI controller feels a little different than like a keyboard version of that same synth. I don't know why, but hey, there's possibly a perceived disconnect, right? It could be placebo, not sure, but I'm willing to believe it. Now on to Espen's claims about expensive synths, two of which I own. The TLDR, yeah, they can be glorified VSTs if you really want to believe it, and I can totally see that point. For example, Waldorf's microwave plugin sounds so damn good to a point where I even question having the third wave. But going back to my point of this whole video is that if you need a sound to be set to a specific tone by default with limitations, certain synths will always have that sound no matter what. That is aiding workflow, and that is speeding up your process, and that is giving you the permission to ignore the endless possibilities of what a computer can do. Not to mention, I, for example, wasn't able to nail, or more importantly, learn the sound of classic 90s house until I just used a JV1080 and an MPC 60. Then, with those limitations in mind, I took that with me to newer and more modern gear. For example, you could do anything in Ableton Live, or any DAW for that matter, but it's as gray and as transparent as its default color scheme. You need to have a goal of where you want to go and shape the software to get you there. Otherwise, it's possibility paralysis, right? I love limitations, and in some cases, I need limitations, and I think that that's where creativity thrives. And in some cases, that can provide the leverage we need to create something, right? A wall in our way gives us something to push off of, a way to build momentum. Otherwise, we're kind of just standing in a void with nowhere to go. Or again, it gives me the permission to ignore the sounds or settings or apps that a computer or a VST would let me get distracted by. It's the cliche, but can it check your email trope, right? Now, I don't recommend buying expensive gears to anyone because there are just as good sounding synthesizers for way cheaper. And I do agree with Espen that digital synths especially, for the most part, are just processors running some code. Hilariously, working for different music companies and understanding a bit more of the manufacturing side, it's crazy to see how one processor can be responsible for so many different products and from a ton of different companies at the same time. It's just a platform to build whatever you want on, right? But where I think it starts to get kind of special is if you take that computer or that VST and a dedicated controller that was built with that instrument in mind, then I can start to see the value in acquiring different products, especially when the company has a vision of how a workflow should be. Anyway, my friend, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you too, Espen, for all the knowledge and inspiration you've given me. Now I'm curious to hear from you all. Where are you on the software or hardware side of things? Do you skip gear for software, or do you still find having hardware valuable to your process? Also, go check out Espen's video down below. Let me know what you think. And yeah, chat with you down below in the comments. All right, peace.